COVID safety programs.
February is the shortest month, but it's never a bad time to brush up on your African American Heritage required reading. Councilmember Mark Ridley Thomas from District 10 shares his top 10 items for reading African American writers.
African American Heritage Month is an expression of the history, the struggles, the contributions of African Americans in this country. I think African American Heritage Month should be taken as an opportunity to learn more about the African American experience. Literature is one of the ways in which African Americans have made a huge contribution to this nation. It's commonly suggested that education is the great equalizer, and to the extent that that is the case, literature is one of the clear venues through which that education, that knowledge, that intellect, that wisdom is communicated. These 10 selections get at that in a variety of ways.
While confined here in the Birmingham City Jail, I came across your recent statement calling my present activities unwise and untimely.
The letter from the Birmingham jail on this list would be the standout. And I would commend it to readers far and wide, irrespective of age, ethnicity, or gender. It is a very moving document, particularly when it comes to grips with the context in which it was written. And so I think it's hard not to embrace it as the must-read on this list.
Injustice must be exposed.
The point is to emphasize literacy. Read, baby, read. It makes a difference in the quality of your life and the altitude of your thinking. We can't express that enough. Our next generation will clearly be better for it.
It's an annual event in Leimert Park that not even a pandemic could derail. The Festival of Culture, Unity, and Love commenced at the Bob Marley Day event. Check this out.
I'm celebrating Bob Marley's birthday today. I'm here today because this is our community, and we love to be out here and share our culture and our experience with people who come through who has never been here. So you not only get a black experience, but you get a Caribbean experience, you get an African experience, you get a diverse experience from a lot of the vendors out here, and we show everybody love.
It feels like every day is Black History Month in Leimert Park because there's so many opportunities to connect with your elders, with kin, and just to celebrate that through building community.
I'm here celebrating Bob Marley Day amongst the community.
I was born in Jamaica, so I grew up listening to his music. So, and it's all about love and, spreading love. That means a lot to me.
Today, some architects helped us establish and set up a new shelf for our fridge that includes a microwave, a hand sanitizing station, and a whole bunch of other good stuff that'll be really useful for the space.
Yes, we started this fridge in July as we're one of many LA community fridges. We just run the Leimert Park one, and before this we had just a bench with crates that was holding all of our donations.
There's so much art and history and music here. Like, it's been here since day one. Like, ever since I was a kid, and I took lessons here at the Old World stage. It's always been here. Nothing but kind, nothing but joyous, like happy, living life and expression. It's always been art, always been love, and always been peace. And so that's what we're trying to keep. You're in a warm, graceful, loving bubble. It's so crazy.
I'd like to tell everybody, come out to Leimert Park on a Saturday and a Sunday. Come and support your local street vendors. Come out because this is all about you and us and keeping our livelihood and opening back for 2021.
For the freshest produce, urbanites in LA still count on farmers markets to bring the best of farm-to-table goods. And the market at Eastmont Community Center is dedicated to bringing fresh produce and nutritional education to East Los Angeles.
So the East Los Angeles Farmers Market is sponsored by Eastmont Community Center, and our main focus is really to bring nutritious products and nutrition education to our community in East Los Angeles. In addition to that, our main focus is to provide vendors who are coming from different regions in California an opportunity to have a safe and reliable place to sell their products, specifically to individuals and communities who normally don't have access to farmers markets such as East Los Angeles.
So I heard that we have a farmers market in East LA, and I was excited to hear that because I usually travel to other cities outside of our neighborhoods to go to farmers markets. So this is really exciting.
Well, I prefer to get my produce here, even though you might be paying a little bit more, but you're going to get fresher product. It's not something that's been shipped and stored in a warehouse, so I know it's from the farms, and I like that.
One of the goals at the East Los Angeles Farmers Market is to provide incentives and increase the purchasing power of a lot of our low-income residents. What we do is we provide them with a $10 match for $10 that they purchase through using their CalFresh or EBT card. So their $10 purchasing power turns into $20 here at our East LA Farmers Market.
De que compre uno de $10 para arriba en la tarjeta que nos dio el gobierno y le duplican a uno $10 más, y es una ayuda para la gente que hoy en día estamos viviendo tiempos difíciles.
And it's better to buy in here than the stores because they give you extra cash, extra money for buy more things for less money.
A mí me gusta porque la fruta es más sabrosa, tiene muy buen sabor y más que nada tarda mucho para que no se eche a perder la verdura, el huevo, todo está muy mejor y es más saludable.
The East Los Angeles Market is open every Saturday from 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. Our vendors are hard at work. They're coming from different regions throughout California. It's an organic and certified market, so you're receiving some of the best quality products here.
In our feature story this week, we talk with Michelle Barton of the Los Angeles Department of Sanitation and Environment about their biodiversity program. She gives us a closer look at how the department is working to keep the foliage and fauna of Los Angeles ecologically eclectic.
In 2017, LA Sanitation started the city's first biodiversity program, and our program is really working to increase equity and access to nature, and also really work towards measuring progress on the city's no net loss of biodiversity goal. So we're looking to make sure that we don't lose any species as we look ahead and plan for the future. If you have a diverse array of flora and fauna and ecosystems, it means that you have the basic elements of habitat needed for them to survive and thrive. And without these foundational species, we don't have the level of enjoyment of our city. We don't have the ecosystem services that these flora and fauna and ecosystems provide. It's really important that we carve out spaces across the city for wildlife and native plants.
I clean my bird bath and I refill the bird feeders. I do not use any pesticides, or I wouldn't use any herbicides or anything, so it's an organic garden. To be able to do something positive is something that feels really good.
Things people can do in their home gardens that are really important to native wildlife and biodiversity are make sure that you are using plants that don't have high water requirements, that avoid the use of chemical fertilizers and other harsh chemicals that are going to harm some of the wildlife that are sensitive to such things. Remove invasive and non-native species. Native plants really do provide the best habitat for native animals, and so making sure that we are doing our part to avoid use of noxious, invasive species will truly improve habitat for them. Especially as we find ourselves at home right now due to the pandemic, I think going outside for a walk, going to a local park, visiting a place that has these lovely bird songs and pollinators or small mammals scurrying around can really just be such a welcome break and a way to appreciate the incredible biodiversity we have here in LA.
There actually is a need to take action to preserve what we have so that we can keep enjoying it for future generations.
Teens are invited to a songwriting seminar. Learn about pop music and dance in the early 20th century, or check out the UCLA Asian American Film Festival online. All this up next on Virtual Things to Do.
The Los Angeles Public Library invites teens to take up the guitar and try songwriting. Students are welcome to take part in a 1-hour program where you can learn the basics of guitar playing. For those who don't have a guitar, you are invited to stick around for an introduction to songwriting. This online program is brought to you by the Central Library of Los Angeles at 4 p.m. Thursday, February 25th. For more information on how to participate, send an email to teens@lapl.org. The Los Angeles City Historical Society is happy to announce the latest edition of their ongoing webinar series, A Talk With. On Wednesday, February 24th, the Society will present a talk with Allison Rose Jefferson, Black migrations to Los Angeles and the development of the popular music and dance scene in the early 20th century. She will explore the development of this scene in the Central Avenue community when it was the hub of African American life during the Jim Crow era and much more. So be sure to check out A Talk with Allison Rose Jefferson, happening February 24th beginning at 12 noon. For more information, visit lacityhistory.org/events. Join fellow SoCal cinephiles for the UCLA Asian American Studies Center 2021 Film Festival. The UCLA Asian American Studies Center, along with the UCLA Film and Television Archive, come together for a celebration of Asian American filmmaking with this virtual film festival. The festival will feature powerful imagery and poignant commentary about meaningful issues facing Asian American and Pacific Islander communities. Filmmakers, scholars, and artists share their experiences with a vast online community. So don't wait. Check out the UCLA Asian American Studies Center 2021 Film Festival, happening the weekend of February 19th and February 26th. For more information, visit aasc.ucla.edu/filmfest/2021. And that's a look at some virtual things to do.
That's it for this edition. I'm Natalia Bilbao. From all of us here at LA This Week, thank you so much for joining us. A reminder that you can catch us online at lacityview.org, and we're also on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. See you next time for more LA This Week.
Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Blumenfield.
Blumenfield present.
Bonin.
Bonin present.
Buscaino.
Morning, here.
Cedillo.
Here.
De Leon.
Here.
Harris Dawson.
Present.
Koretz.
Present.
Krikorian.
Here.
Lee.
Present.
Martinez.
Present.
O'Farrell.
Present.
Price. Price. Rahman.
Here.
Ridley Thomas.
Here.
Rodriguez.
Here.
14 members present and a quorum, Madam President.
Okay, first order of business.
Approval of the minutes of February 23rd, 2021.
Mr. Bonin moves and Ms. Rodriguez seconds. Next.
Commendatory resolutions for approval.
Mr. Krikorian moves and Mr. O'Farrell seconds. Next.
Madam President, would council like all items to go forthwith today?
Without objection, that would be the order. Next.
Thank you. Items 1 through 23 are items for which public hearings have been held. A committee report for item number 4 has been submitted and posted to Council File 20-1609. A community impact statement has also been submitted for item 4 from the Boyle Heights Neighborhood Council to state their support for the matter. Separately, a community impact statement has been submitted for item 6 from the Los Feliz Neighborhood Council to state their support for that matter. Items 24 through 27 are items for which public hearings have not been held. Item 28 is an item scheduled for closed session for which a public hearing has been held. 10 votes are required for consideration.
Okay, without objection, those items are now before us. Members, do you wish to call any of these items special? Ms. Rodriguez?
Yes, thank you, Madam President. I'd like to hold 20 for comments.
I'm sorry, we can't hear you. 20 or 24?
20.
20, okay.
Thank you.
20 for comments from Ms. Rodriguez. Any others?
Madam President, I'd like to hold item
Hold
11.
on for just a second, Mr. Ridley Thomas. Mr. O'Farrell?
Thank you, Madam President. Items 5 and 14, I'd like to hold for remarks, and that's all I need. Thank you.
That's items 5 and 14?
Correct.
Thank you. Mr. Blumenfield?
I'd like to hold our 12 for an amendment.
Okay, go right ahead.
The amendment is to delete the second moving clause and replace with the language from the original motion, quote, instruct the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment to develop a plan and protocol to proactively provide training on issues relating to gender identity and gender expression to individual neighborhood councils when a board member or actively involved stakeholder has transitioned or made it known that they have changed their name or preferred pronouns.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. O'Farrell. Any others, Mr. Blumenfield?
That's it. Thank you.
Mr. Krikorian? Mr. Krikorian?
Sorry about that. Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to call item number 2 special, please, for brief comments.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Ridley Thomas?
Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to hold item 11 for comments. Thank you.
Item 11 for comments from Mr. Ridley Thomas. Any others? Mr. Lee? Mr. Lee?
Apologize, Madam President. If I could ask that item 4 be called special.
Okay, are these for comments, sir?
Yes.
Thank you. Any other items, members? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, what items can we go ahead and vote on?
We can now vote on item 1, 3, 6 through 10, 13, 15 through 19, 21 through 23.
Okay, let's go ahead and prepare to vote on those items. Please call the roll.
Blumenfield.
Blumenfield, aye.
Bonin.
Bonin, aye.
Buscaino.
Yes.
Cedillo.
Yes.
De Leon.
Aye.
Harris Dawson.
Yes.
Koretz.
Aye.
Krikorian.
Aye.
Lee.
Aye.
Martinez.
Aye.
O'Farrell.
Aye.
Price. Rahman. Rahman.
Aye.
Ridley Thomas.
Aye.
Rodriguez.
Aye.
14 ayes. These items are adopted.
Okay, let's move on to public comment. Go ahead, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. As indicated on the agenda, members of the public wishing to offer public comment should call 669-254-5252 and use meeting ID number 160-535-8466 and then press pound. Then press pound again when prompted for participant ID. Once admitted into the meeting, press star 9 to request to speak. Finally, when you hear the last 4 digits of your phone number called out, press star 6. Let me repeat, call 669-254-5252 and use meeting ID number 160-535-8466 and then press pound. Then press pound again when prompted for participant ID. Once admitted into the meeting, press star 9 to request to speak. Finally, when you hear the last 4 digits of your phone number called out, press star 6.
So, to members of the public calling in, when it's your turn to speak, please state which of the agenda items you'd like to speak on. You have 1 minute to speak, up to 3 minutes total, and 1 minute for general public comment if you wish. Please take up the items first before general public comment. When speaking on the agenda items, you must be on topic. Our goal is to get through as many speakers as we can. If you're not speaking on topic, or if we can't tell whether you're speaking on topic, you'll get a brief warning from me or the president. If you don't immediately get clearly on topic, or again stray off topic, the president will cut you off and you'll forfeit the rest of your speaking time, and we'll move on to the next speaker. We're going to take 30 minutes total public comment. The items that will be open for public comment are items 4, 12, and 24 through 27. That's 4, 12, 24 through 27, and I'll explain in a moment why item 4 is included. Finally, for members of the public calling in to speak, as soon as you hear someone address you by reading off the last 4 digits of your phone number or other identifying information, if you're using a block number, you're live in the council meeting and it's your turn to speak. Please immediately press star 6 to then unmute yourselves and tell us which item you'd like to speak on. We understand that you may be listening on channel 35 or computer or other device. If so, 2 things. First, keep one ear to the phone. There's a time delay between the live meeting and the broadcast, and if you're just listening to the broadcast, you won't hear right away when we read off your identifying information to unmute yourself, and we may think you're no longer on the line. Also, turn down the volume on your other devices because of the time delay, and we may get feedback as well. Finally, on item 4, there were proposed changes to the ordinance at issue from the Economic Development and Jobs Committee. This is Council File 20-1609. I believe there may be an amending motion to adopt the ordinance dated today instead of in the report. So let me explain what the changes are for the public. So in section 200.101B, the word exempt will be added before the words managers in the last sentence to read, employee does not include exempt managers. In section 200.102, the change of the words a total of to no less than, and the ordinance will be amended, or the recommendation was to amend the ordinance to ensure that if an employee has one store that qualifies under the draft ordinance section 200.101C3, an employee at any of its stores that dedicates 10% or more to grocery and pharmacy sales will qualify as a covered employee for hazard pay. I don't know whether we want to take public comment first, Madam President, or somebody would like to make a motion for the change. If there were such a motion, I would recommend it would take the following form. I move that we amend recommendation 1 in the Economic Development and Jobs Committee report, Council File 20-1609, which is number 4 on the Council agenda, to have recommendation 1 read, present and adopt the accompanying ordinance dated February 24th, today, 2021, not February 5th.
Is there a second? I'm sorry. We need a mover?
I'll move.
I'll second.
Okay.
Mr. O'Farrell moved and I second.
Very good.
Anything else, Mr. City Attorney?
That's it.
Mr. Bonin?
Thank you, Madam President. I apologize for not mentioning this sooner. We have a technical amendment to item number 27 that I believe has circulated, and I want to be sure we had called attention to that before public comment.
Yes, sir. It's still on the desk.
Thank you.
Mr. Krikorian, would you like to speak on our closed session item? Or is it okay to proceed with a vote on item 28?
Thank you, Madam President. Item 28 was considered by the Budget and Finance Committee, which recommends approval of the City Attorney's recommendations. That can be done in open session unless members have questions or concerns that they'd like to discuss in closed session.
Any questions on this item? Okay, seeing none. Let's go ahead and vote on this item, item 28. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And if I may, in the case entitled Jane M.B.Q. Doe versus City of Los Angeles, the recommendation is to expend up to $1,995,000 in settlement of the matter. Blumenfield.
Blumenfield, aye.
Bonin.
Bonin, aye.
Buscaino.
Aye.
Cedillo. Cedillo. Cedillo.
Cedillo, aye.
De Leon.
Aye.
Harris Dawson.
Yes.
Koretz.
Aye.
Krikorian.
Aye.
Lee.
Aye.
Martinez.
Aye.
O'Farrell.
Aye.
Price. Rahman.
Aye.
Ridley Thomas.
Aye.
Rodriguez.
Aye.
14 ayes, the motion is adopted.
Okay, let's go ahead and move on to public comment. Go ahead and take the first speaker.
Caller with a phone number ending in 5137, please press star 6. Please state your name and the item you'd like to speak on.
Good morning, City Council. This is Jamie Penn. I'm the socialist who's the Sub-District 3 representative for Wilshire Center Koreatown Neighborhood Council. My pronouns are she, her, and I'd like to speak on items 4, 11, and 12, as well as my general public comment.
You have 3 minutes for your items and 1 minute for general public comment. Please go ahead.
So actually,
all right, thank you so much. Yes, go ahead, Pablo.
Madam President, sorry, Speaker. We've actually voted on item 11. Or excuse me, we haven't voted on it, but it's not being substantively amended. So you can have a minute, Speaker, for items 4 and 12, and then a general public comment minute.
All right, thank you, Pablo.
Thank you.
So for the item number 4, I just want to commend Honorable Councilmember Mark Ridley Thomas, who's been steadily working on what seemingly appears to be the background. One of the vital steps in solving this giant housing problem that we find ourselves in is the necessity of resources. And so I just want to bring attention to this item, which is utilizing its COVID-19 funds from the state. This is money that we need to be able to use. Actually, I might be speaking on the wrong item. Number 4 is the Economic Development and Jobs Committee. I'm so sorry. This is the one as far as giving additional pay. And so, yeah, I absolutely support this. But then I do want to speak on, as I was trying to speak on the item number 12. On I'm sorry, no, I had it correct. So 71, 8071, yes, we need that money. Thank you, Mark Ridley Thomas, Honorable Councilmember Mark Ridley Thomas. And then on item number 12, I just want to make sure that this is clear. We had spoken on this. We've been involved with committee for this gender training to be standard. I want to make sure that this isn't just when someone transitions on a board. This information should be information that all elected officials have. So I just want to make sure that item number 12 is as was originally suggested and is not used for when someone transitions on the board. I myself am a transgender woman, and I believe this information should be something that all people in our government system are familiar with. On general public comment, I just want to mention, this is actually the reason why I called. I wasn't going to call on it at all. This morning, Mayor Garcetti confidently proclaimed progress with around 100 rooms secured using Project Room Key, which is a program that's been operating for about a year next month. It's a crisis that requires over like 70,000 rooms. So the mayor then, after confidently speaking about 100 rooms, said that he could use help securing additional rooms. To my knowledge, Garcetti himself owns hotel properties, rental properties, and I believe most of the council members are landlords themselves. And I just think it's absolutely unacceptable for the mayor to ask the public for help on this. And if I could just recommend Priceline or Hotels.com or any of the services to find rental properties, there's plenty of properties that are just vacant right now. And I think that we should all put attention on that. And I think perhaps the council could assist our mayor in finding these rental properties that have eluded him for a year now. So that's really it. Thank you so much for your time. Hope you all have a wonderful day.
Thank you very much. Next speaker.
Caller with the phone number ending in 1676, please press star 6. Please state your name and the item you'd like to speak on.
Hi, my name is Kevin. I'd like to speak on all available items and general public comment, please.
Sure. You have 3 minutes for items 4, 12, 24 through 27, and then a minute for general public comment following that. Please begin.
Okay, thank you. Item number 4 is for additional pay for grocery workers. I 100% support that. And I just want to get ahead of the callers who are probably on the line who are going to call in to oppose this because they would like to call frontline grocery workers, heroes and give them all sorts of platitudes, but not actually pay them what they're worth. Grocery workers have been on the front lines of this pandemic. Without them, we would be struggling to, bring food home. And I just want to say that the amount of money that's on the table to give them additional pay pales in comparison to their role in society. So fully support number 4. Item number 12, pertaining to gender identity on neighborhood councils. Yes, support, that's good. That should definitely be something that neighborhood councils are made aware of, particularly with some of the people on these bodies who are, let's just say, not attuned to how to treat people of other gender expressions. For my general public comment, I just want to highlight the FEMA 100% reimbursement for hotels, and Mayor Garcetti this morning asking a bunch of people to provide him leads on hotels. I think that's a really silly comment, and I don't know if he thinks that ordinary people know hotel owners. Like, I don't know any hotel owners. It's his job as the mayor to use his emergency powers, which he has, to commandeer the hotels and seek the FEMA reimbursement after the fact. It's not our job as ordinary Angelenos who are seeing people suffer on the streets through homelessness to, go onto Expedia and find new hotel rooms to put people into. That's the mayor's job. He has the power to commandeer them. There's no reason for the delay. And this council has been dragging its feet to put the bond and ramen motion on the agenda. And every day you do that, 5 more unhoused people die. So there's really no reason to keep this waiting. You all have passed the buck so many times between we think you know how to.
Next speaker.
Caller ending in 9936, press *6 to unmute yourself. Please state your name and the items you'd like to speak on.
Hi, I'd like to speak on item 12, 4, and provide general public comment.
Sure. You have 2 minutes for the items, followed by 1 minute for general public comment. Please begin.
Great. For item 12, I just want to say that there needs to be a plan and protocol, but there also needs to be resolution and removal procedures. We want accountability. We want action. There are some known offenders within the neighborhood council system that intentionally misgender or don't recognize gender, and maybe only recognize gender if they feel suspicious or unsure of someone's gender. There needs to be a universal protocol in place for anyone who calls in who sounds male or female or otherwise, and there needs to be a very clear plan and procedure for how to remove people who are known offenders. On item 4, when it comes to hazard pay, I want to sort of second what Kevin had said about, yes, it's great to clap and call our grocery workers heroes, but they need proper hazard pay. They are true essential workers. Our mayor spent 5 days moving traffic cones at Dodger Stadium in front of a camera crew, dubbed himself an essential worker, and got a vaccine and left. We need to support the people who are out here for the last year, risking their lives and livelihoods to keep themselves housed and also keep our infrastructure in the city going. In terms of general public comment, I also want to sort of circle back to the video that was mentioned this morning. I know it's early, but there's a video of our mayor in Chinatown this morning talking to a handful of activists, literally 6 people. They asked him about the FEMA funding. They asked him about seizing the hotels. And his response is to ask them for help. I just want to say, remind you as a council, remind the mayor and the public, we will not be gaslighted. The FEMA money has been here for months. At NERA, you've had the ability to activate and distribute this, and even have it properly agendized outside of the bond and ramen motion. You guys don't even need FEMA money. You have raised our taxes twice, agreed up over $1 billion that we've committed to you guys that you still can't account for homelessness, that you still haven't meaningfully distributed. Skid Row exists. It's been existing for half a century. There is still no proof point in the city has any investment or long-term care to provide any solutions for homelessness. You can have announced a city emergency. You've had the ability to level up for state funding with federal funding on a silver platter.
Thank you.
So we want...
Thank you. Next speaker.
Caller ending in 7719, press *6 to unmute yourself. Please state your name and the items you'd like to speak on.
Thank you. It's Eric Previn from Studio City, and I'm very proud of the Amanda Foundation, who are getting I don't know what they're getting actually, because it was a $2.5 million contract to do the spay and neutering. It comes up very quickly. I would like to speak on more than one item, by the way, but so what are we doing? Are we going to come up with $500,000 for that boutique spay and neuter place, correct? That would be good to know. I don't know. I'd like to also thank you for reaching out to the grocery workers, but that amendment, a total of, quote unquote, changed to no less than, quote unquote. I wish I could have heard, because it was going so quickly. Despite Fauble's tenacity and clarity, it was very hard to follow, jumping between documents. But anyway, good work. Now, in terms of regulating whether or not people can have cats, up to 4 or 5 cats, I know there's probably a niche market you're going after, but I don't know. You should, I mean, when I saw it, I was like, good Lord, what if, back off, sort of. And now I'm going to veer toward my general public comment, because I want to give the time to other speakers. Ready? Are you ready?
Yes, please begin, Mr. Previn.
Okay, so I'm very upset about the settlement of $1.995 million for the case about Mr. Kane, a cop, LAPD cop, who was grooming and eventually raping a cadet who was one of the 7 who was out stealing cars, and they were way off what we expect from even young police officers. But I still think his conduct was appalling beyond belief. He only got 2 years. in jail when he was facing more than 7, and I'm okay with that because jail is not what he needs. What he needs is serious shame and help, you know. And what a horrible thing to do. But why are the city taxpayers paying this bill for his egregious conduct, since it was the LA Police Protective League who are supposed to regulate their officers? And we have a mill up in Mr. Krikorian's office of retaliation, harassment, and discrimination lawsuits. And we have in the mayor's office the same kind of conduct with LAPD.
Thank you, Mr. Previn.
Call in user 1, please press star 6. Please state your name and the item you'd like to speak on.
Hi, I'd like to speak on 12 and general public comment, please.
You have a minute for each. Please begin.
On item 12, I would like the City Council to ensure that this training is applicable to all neighborhood councils without any exception, just for neighborhood councils who have a member who happened to come out while serving on the council. There are many people who serve on neighborhood councils who are subject to transphobic attacks already because of this gap in the guidelines. So I'm not sure if the amendment today has handicapped or weakened this motion in any regard in terms of its applicability to every single neighborhood council member, but it should not. This motion should apply to every single person who serves on a neighborhood council in a proactive manner, so that people, especially youth who we are trying to develop as leaders, are not subject to transphobic attacks from other neighborhood council members. So I please urge you to make sure that the language in this motion is strong in that regard. With general public comment, I'd like to urge the council to, of course, seize the hotels. And in this regard, I would speak to how the council operates as 15 little kingdoms. And Kevin De Leon, in your kingdom, I would like you to be a leader and focus on housing every single Black woman in Skid Row. I think that maybe if we're going to wait so long to agendize certain motions and to come together as a council to work on housing everybody and seizing hotels, then you should be a leader, Kevin De Leon, and figure out every single hotel available in your district in Skid Row to house Black women, and do so immediately. I don't see why any of you in your little kingdom should wait. All of you should take the lead, but especially you, Kevin De Leon, who has seen how this has impacted your district. You should be moving quicker than anybody else in this matter. We shouldn't have to listen to the mayor try to gaslight us and tell us we're already working hard, we're already poor, we're struggling to get jobs, and now you want us to do your jobs too? You guys won't defund the police, but you'll furlough all your city workers who could be doing their jobs on full time.
Next speaker.
Call in user 2, please press star 6. Please state your name and the items you'd like to speak on.
Yeah, I'd like to speak on 412 and general public comment, but I'd like a clarification from Fauble. Did the council member Blumenfeld amend number 12 back to the original language, so now that it's not all-inclusive for all NCs?
Mr. Blumenfeld amended it. I don't know all of the original, but so please begin on the comments on 412 and general public.
Okay, so item number 4, I'm in support. Obviously, these frontline workers have kept everyone fed throughout the pandemic, and their actions have been heroic in the face of the pandemic. And so, yeah, before the VICA folks get on here and start complaining and asking for report back to try and derail this, we need to support these people, and they need adequate pay for the danger that they've been in. On number 12, Mr. Blumenfeld, if you just amended this back to the original language, which only requires NCs with members who come out as non-binary or trans, you've disregarded what happened in the committee, where over a dozen people called in on this item and asked that all NCs be included in this. I don't know why you would now try and go back and forth, back to the original. It was one of the only times I can ever remember this city council being responsive to public comment when Councilmember Bonin amended the motion based on the comments from public commenters who wanted all NCs to go through this training. These NCs are full of bigots who need this training. So I don't know why you would amend it back. That's just garbage, absolute garbage from you, especially when this issue hits home for you. It happened in your own district at the Reseda Neighborhood Council. So why are you trying to water this down when it was correctly fixed by Bonin? Terrible. Strike your amendment, pull it. The way it's written in the agenda today is the way it needs to be. Now on to general public comment.
Okay.
I'd like to echo everyone else who's called in to say you all need to stop dragging your feet. It's been 34 days since FEMA promised reimbursement funds. We got the mayor of LA out here today asking us to find hotel rooms. We're supposed to believe, I mean, he's inept, but he's so incredibly inept with the full power of the city government behind him. He can't locate hotel rooms. Give me a break. Nuri Martinez lying. The Bonin-Rahman motion is a report back. You can move that forward at any time. And Nuri is lying in the news saying, oh, we need to find out first about the funding. No, you don't. That's a report back. Move it. You have 100% the ability to do so. Stop dragging your feet on this. Commandeer the hotels. Go on orbits or whatever you need to do. Kayak, whatever. Find the hotel rooms. Let's go. Stop with the gaslighting, all of you. I yield my time.
Next speaker.
Caller with a phone number ending in 3207, please press *6. Please state your name and the item you'd like to speak on.
My name is Jane Wishon, and I'm here to speak in favor of Agenda Item 4 and also general public comment.
You have a minute for each. Please begin.
Great, thank you. Good morning, Madam President and honorable council members. My name is Jane Wishon. I'm speaking in favor of Agenda Item 4. I'm a resident of CD5 and the political vice president of the Stonewall Democratic Club, one of the largest Democratic clubs in the state and the county-wide club focused on LGBTQ+ and feminist issues. As you know, women and members of the LGBTQ+ community, especially those who are BIPOC and or trans, comprise a significant proportion of the workers impacted by Agenda Item 4. Stonewall strongly supports this agenda item, the urgency ordinance for hero pay, and Stonewall also recognizes that these workers, these heroes, have found themselves among essential frontline workers during the pandemic, literally risking their lives and those of their families while making sure that our communities can access basic needs such as food and medications, all of that for close to or at minimum wage. Meanwhile, grocery and drugstore corporations have seen record profits. These profits come as a result of the hard work of our workers, and many of those workers come from our marginalized communities where infection rates are highest. This is the right policy as new and more contagious variants of COVID-19 develop. The City of Los Angeles must lead the way, as it always has, in fighting for the rights and dignity of working people. Thank you. I yield my remaining time.
Thank you, Speaker.
Caller with the phone number ending in 0899, please press *6. Please state your name and the item you'd like to speak on.
This is Stacy Dawson Stearns. Hello, illustrious council members. I would like to speak 1 minute of general public comment.
Let's begin.
I am not the council president like Nuri Martinez, but if I were, I can guarantee one thing. I would agendize a meeting to determine the swiftest path to relief, and that meeting would not adjourn until every council member was walking out the door with marching orders to begin an immediate, safe, and humane process of bringing people into shelter. FEMA money, people. With their partners, with their companion animals, with their possessions, and most of all, with their humanity intact. Please lay your humongous egos down and enact immediate measures as a council to address this failure and make it right today. P.S. Project Broomkey is a punitive, dysfunctional failure, and so is Eric Garcetti. He just asked activists to find empty hotel rooms as if he's not sitting on them. P.P.S. Can I urge the more reasonable CMs to redirect attention to the people's budget of Los Angeles? That coalition has generated more compelling data and public engagement around the budgeting process over the past year and a half than this council has in its entire history. PPPS. It's ridiculous that you are greenlighting development projects that offer a select number of affordable housing units when you know and everyone else knows.
Caller with a phone number ending in 6614, please press star 6.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, what items would you like to speak on?
Hello, good morning. My name is Edgar Ortiz, and I would like to speak on items 4 as well as general public comment.
Sure, you have a minute for item 4, followed by a minute for general public comment. Please begin.
Thank you very much. Hello, good morning, Honorable Madam Mayor and Council. Thank you for the opportunity to speak before you today. My name is Edgar Ortiz, and I'm the Research and Policy Analyst of the Los Angeles Alliance for New Economies Grocery and Retail Project. A common refrain we've heard is that this policy will not make workers safer, which could not be further from the truth. Frontline grocery and drug retail is among the most dangerous sectors to work in the country, with LA being no exception. The county's COVID data shows retail to be among the hardest hit industries, both in terms of workers and site outbreaks. Just last week alone, the County Department of Public Health reported 517 grocery staff were exposed to COVID, with store concentrations in neighborhoods such as North Hollywood and Northridge, which have already been among the hardest hit since the pandemic began almost a year ago, both in terms of cases as well as deaths. If additional funding to mitigate food insecurity, inadequate health and medical access, and prevention of homelessness doesn't count as making people safe, I'm not sure what does. Juxtaposed next to this dire picture for working families is something much more idyllic for corporations, who have seen massive profits as high as 100% and 150%. 9 of the top publicly traded companies saw a net operating income rise from $26 billion to $39 billion in 1 year, or 53%. In addition, many large companies received millions in COVID stimulus aid, such as through the Federal Reserve Secondary Market Corporate Credit Facility. According to the Food Industry Association, grocery prices increased 5.9% from June 2019 through June 2020, several times above year annual inflationary increases. While at the blink of an eye, workers lost the benefits that they receive, if any, that they got from companies, the companies themselves continue to rake in massive profits as prices remain fairly steady, not dropping from the peak points in June of last year. And these profits being used to buy back stocks and consolidate wealth, as opposed to compensating workers or investing in stores. Opposition likes to say that workers are absolutely heroes, but nothing. This is absolutely about health and safety as well as economic justice. But more importantly, it is the fundamental right thing to do, and we urge your support today, as many other cities have also supported.
Thank you, Speaker. Next speaker.
Caller with the phone number ending in 3100, please press star 6. Please state your name and the item you'd like to speak on.
Hi there. My name is Maybe. My pronouns are she, her, and they, them. I'm a member of the Silver Lake Neighborhood Council and also the co-chair of the LGBTQ+ Alliance of Neighborhood Councils. And I'm speaking as an individual today on items 12 and general public comment.
You have a minute for each. Please begin.
Thank you. I really hope that you didn't just vote to change the motion back to, and this is for item 12, back to the language that states that gender inclusive training would only be provided to neighborhood councils that have somebody who they know is an out trans person. As many of you know, there is a situation going on in the Reseda Neighborhood Council where a youth member named Spencer, who's non-binary, has been actively misgendered and dead named. Had this sort of training already been available to neighborhood councils across the city, we perhaps could have avoided a youth member having to experience being dead named and misgendered. This is completely unacceptable. I don't think that there's anybody who's trans or non-binary on the city council, but there are many, many trans and non-binary people in the neighborhood council system. You must make sure that those people are protected. And then for general public comment, I just wanted to say seize the hotel, and I yield my time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker.
Caller with a phone number ending in 6068, please press star 6. Please state your name and the item you'd like to speak on.
Yes, this is Richie Serdenko from People City Council. I'd like to speak on items 4, 12, and general public comment, please.
You have 2 minutes for the item, followed by 1 minute for general public comment. Please begin.
Yeah, number 4, I just want to voice support for giving grocery workers and retail workers a raise. They've been frontline workers this entire time during the pandemic, and they certainly deserve it. Not only do they deserve to skip the line for vaccines as frontline workers, but they deserve this $5 raise. Don't listen to people like Vika or Stuart Waldman, who I'm sure are on the line itching to get in. We need to stop listening to pro-business Angelinos and listen to the people that are actually being affected in the city. 12, I want to voice support of this motion, but I'm unsure what Councilmember Blumenfeld amended it to. But this motion should be applicable to all neighborhood councils and its members. Many members of neighborhood councils are subject to transphobia, and this kind of training should be available to all neighborhood councils and all members. So I support this motion, and I support the way it was originally, not the way Blumenfeld edited it. But on the general public comment, a few activists ran into Garcetti today, and asked him about feeding the hotels. And he said, "Why don't you help us find hotel rooms?" And one way we could help find hotel rooms is pushing that Rahman Bonin motion forward, which is just a report back on how to potentially commandeer hotel rooms. It's just a report. You don't need state funding, Nuri. You can pass the report. It's being held up in your COVID committee. You have unilateral power to pass it through committee, put it on council agenda. And here, I'll go to hotels.com and I'll search and tell you what I'm finding for open hotel rooms in Los Angeles right now. The Wayfair downtown has open rooms. The Ritz-Carlton has open rooms. The JW Marriott has open rooms. The Courtyard at LA Live has open rooms. Hotel Figueroa has open rooms. The O Hotel has open rooms. Hotel Indigo has open rooms. The Hoxton downtown LA has open rooms. The Shore Hotel, these are all, there are plenty of open rooms in Los Angeles. I can fucking search it. You don't have to wait for them to come to you. Commandeering hotel rooms means open.
Caller with the phone number ending in 1556, please press star 6.
Hello?
Hi, what items would you like to speak on?
Number 4 in general public comment.
Sure, you have a minute for each. Please begin with number 4.
Great. Good morning. My name is Kayla with the Valley Industry and Commerce Association, VICA. VICA still believes that a thorough economic and policy analysis is necessary to help us understand the impacts of this policy. We need to make an informed decision, not rush decisions that will result in increased costs. We need to know how this will affect workers, consumers, and small grocers. We should know the economic impacts before moving ahead with policies that have the potential to have significant negative consequences. Grocery store workers have truly been on the front line, ensuring that we have access to safe and reliable food supplies throughout the crisis. And as an acknowledgement of that, grocers have undertaken massive efforts and spent millions of dollars to institute policies that keep both workers and customers safe. Grocers have also provided workers with bonuses, time off, extra pay, and other benefits in addition to their negotiated pay. A $5 per hour increase amounts to about 30% of wages. That cost will have to be passed on to consumers in the form of higher grocery costs. We all know that many consumers cannot afford higher costs. Too many in our region and state are struggling to get by as it is. Recently, the Kroger Company announced the permanent closure of 25% of its stores in Long Beach, following the Long Beach City Council ordinance imposing extra pay on grocery stores. These stores, who were already struggling, were pushed over the edge by the increased costs from these policies. This type of action in LA could result in significant grocery store closures in the city of Los Angeles and significant loss of jobs. Finally, the city cannot expect these suffocating provisions from businesses when they are not themselves providing hazard pay to the countless city employees that are keeping Los Angeles running. VICA thanks our frontline workers, but asks the city to reconsider this costly and unnecessary provision. Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker.
Okay, that concludes public comment for today's meeting. Members, let's go ahead and vote on items 24 through 26. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Blumenfield.
Whitfield, aye.
Bonin.
Bonin, aye.
Buscaino.
Aye.
Cedillo.
Cedillo, aye.
Thank you. De Leon.
Aye.
Harris Dawson.
Yes.
Koretz.
Aye.
Krikorian.
Aye.
Lee.
Aye.
Martinez.
Aye.
O'Farrell.
Aye.
Price.
Aye.
Rahman.
Aye.
Ridley Thomas.
Aye.
Rodriguez.
Aye.
15 ayes. These items are adopted.
Okay, let's move on to item 27. This was amended by Mr. Bonin. Let's go ahead and call the roll.
Blumenfield.
Blumenfield, aye.
Bonin.
Bonin, aye.
Buscaino.
Aye.
Cedillo.
Aye.
De Leon.
Aye.
Harris Dawson.
Yes.
Koretz.
Aye.
Krikorian.
Aye.
Lee.
Aye.
Martinez.
Aye.
O'Farrell.
Aye.
Price.
Aye.
Rahman.
Aye.
Ridley Thomas.
Aye.
Rodriguez.
Aye.
15 ayes. This item is adopted as amended.
Okay, let's move on to item number 2, call special by Mr. Krikorian.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I just wanted to call our attention to this matter, members, because this is a very important step forward for the City of Los Angeles to be taking in providing paid parental leave to many of its employees, most of its employees. And I want to thank the council president, first of all. This has been a partnership that we've worked on together now for, I think, 5 or 6 years. And it's been a long journey to get here, but I very much appreciate Council President Martinez's leadership on this, as well as that of Mayor Garcetti and the help of Dana Brown and the Office of the CAO to bring this to the finish line. I think it'll be not only an opportunity for us to provide an important benefit to our employees that will strengthen families and allow us to continue to support our employees, but it'll also set a good example for the rest of the community of employers about what should be expected by their employees to be able to have a good career, maintain that career, stay in their jobs while still supporting their bonding with their children and building stronger families. So, Council President, thank you very much for your work on this, and I ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. Krikorian. I also want to applaud you for your incredible leadership and partnership on this issue. I know you've been working on this for, I want to say, 6 years. The initial motion that we introduced was introduced in 2015. As the second largest city in the nation, and one of the most progressives, it really literally took us 6 years of advocacy to get here today. So I want to thank you for your leadership on that. I think today we are finally going to be able to offer our employees a paid time off for pregnancy and bonding with their children. I think this pandemic, if it's highlighted anything, it's been the inequities that we see over and over again, and the importance of paid time off to be able to take care of your loved ones. Nationally, there's been 5.4 million women in this country who have lost their jobs as a result of the COVID pandemic. And at least 2.1 million women have dropped out of the workforce entirely because they've had to care for a loved one or take care of their children. If we're ever going to undo some of the impacts of the pandemic on women, we're going to have to start to get serious and enact policies that really support them and their families. We have made real changes in workplace policies through our work, Mr. Gregorian, but we've got to stop continuing to punish women for having children and wanting to be caregivers and taking care of their loved ones. There is an unsaid assumption that women will work through maternity leave and we're expected to give birth and get back to work right away, and that's just absolutely ridiculous. And if we want to be able to promote women in the workplace here in the city of LA, if we want more women leading departments, if we want more women making sure they're driving some of these policies that are fair and equitable, we need to recognize the importance of this policy. So, Mr. Gregorian, thank you again for your leadership. I think it's a highlight to kicking off Women's History Month next week, or I should say in a week and a half, I should say. And I'm really proud to lead this work with you in passing this ordinance guaranteeing paid leave for our city employees. So with that, members, I ask for your aye vote. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Blumenfield.
Blumenfield, aye.
Bonin.
Bonin, aye.
Buscaino.
Aye.
Cedillo. Cedillo.
Cedillo, aye.
De Leon.
Aye.
Harris Dawson.
Yes.
Koretz.
Aye.
Krikorian.
Aye.
Lee.
Aye.
Martinez.
Aye.
O'Farrell.
Aye.
Price.
Aye.
Rahman.
Aye.
Ridley Thomas.
Aye.
Rodriguez.
Aye.
15 ayes. This item is adopted.
Oh, thank you. All the women in the council chambers are applauding, by the way, members. Thank you. Let's move on to item number 12. This was amended by Mr. Blumenfield.
So are the dads, by the way.
Yes, sir. So are the dads.
Yeah.
Mr. Blumenfield, would you like to speak to this item?
Yes, please.
Go ahead, sir.
And just to be clear up front, this is to make protection stronger, not weaker, as some folks were implying. As far as I'm concerned, the neighborhood council system should be a welcoming place where everyone who wants to participate is treated with dignity and respect. Sadly, this is not always the case. And this item responds to the manner in which a young person was treated at a neighborhood council in my district based on their gender identity and gender expression. Last summer, Councilman Bonin introduced and the council embraced and adopted a motion to have done, develop, and implement mandatory diversity, equity, and inclusion trainings and anti-bias training for all members of LA neighborhood councils. And Mike, I want to thank you for that. That was important. My motion did two things. One, it emphasized that Dunn's mandatory anti-bias training for all neighborhood council board members must include gender identity and expression. That was part one for all of them. And then secondly, because the mandatory training covers a lot of areas of equity, inclusion, and bias, and may not give enough detail on some for that reason, the second part of my motion required Dunn to give particular attention and a refresher training to an individual neighborhood council when they know that a board member or actively involved stakeholder has transitioned or made known that they have changed their name or preferred pronouns. It's important for Dunn to do that so that the neighborhood council and its board members act properly and do not create problems from the start rather than waiting for a problem to explode. When this item was heard in committee, there seemed to be some confusion about the fact that my motion did both things: universal training for all and specific engagement when a specific issue arises. It was additive. And some read the motion as somehow only doing the second part. Well, they weren't reading the motion very clearly. The motion clearly does both. And while the committee's amendment attempted to address the concern, it inadvertently dropped the second part of proactive, focused engagement when a real world situation arises. And I think both are important. We need to have the training for all neighborhood councils that is ongoing. But yes, we also need to do, when there is sadly an incident, we need to have that refresher. And so this amendment simply puts that back in And that's why I brought this whole thing up in the first place, was to try to, based on an incident, to try to respond to the incident and to try to make the system better and have better protections. So again, this amendment simply puts that additive part back in, and I ask for your aye vote.
Mr. Bonin?
Thanks, Madam President. I just wanted to back Mr. Blumenfield up here. His motion does everything that the callers at committee wanted, plus additional action. So by piggybacking on my motion about training for neighborhood councils from earlier last year, it does everything that the people who were calling into committee wanted, and then it takes an additional step. I wanted to make it clear that Mr. Blumenfield was not stepping back and undermining, but was actually further explaining the intention of his motion and making this even more comprehensive. So thanks, Mr. Blumenfield.
Mr. O'Farrell?
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Mr. Bonin, and thank you, Mr. Blumenfield, for this great improvement to the initial motion. Just for what it's worth, many years ago on this council, I introduced an initiative that requires mandatory training in terms of transgender awareness and sensitivity for all city departments, all elected officials, staff members, and that includes the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment. And that training program is being developed as we speak and should be ready for rollout imminently, and we'll be pushing that along. So there have been collective efforts on this council for years, so no one should get any idea that we aren't sensitive to all of the issues as it relates to LGBTQ, and especially in this fraught time, the awareness and sensitivity to transgender training for everyone. And everyone who serves on a neighborhood council should absolutely be educated along with everyone else. And Los Angeles has always taken a leading role in this, and we will continue down that road through this initiative. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. O'Farrell, and thank you, Mr. Bonin, for that clarification as well. Members, is prepared to vote on item number 12 as amended by Mr. Blumenfield. Go ahead. Please call the roll.
Blumenfield.
Blumenfield, aye.
Bonin.
Bonin, aye.
Buscaino.
Aye.
Cedillo.
Aye.
De Leon.
Aye.
Harris Dawson.
Yes.
Koretz.
Aye.
Krikorian.
Aye.
Lee.
Aye.
Martinez.
Aye.
O'Farrell.
Aye.
Price.
Aye.
Rahman.
Aye.
Ridley Thomas.
Aye.
Rodriguez.
Aye.
15 ayes. This item is adopted as amended.
Okay, let's move on to item number 4. This was called special by Mr. Lee for comments. Mr. Lee?
Thank you, Madam President. Colleagues, I'm over this last year and working with all of you, I've seen how hard all of you have worked to ensure the safety of all the people out there working, our essential workers. We've put in different measures to protect them, whether they were in grocery stores or other occupations that have been really in this time, in order for our economy and for people to, still be fed, have, moved that forward to protect them. And I appreciate that so much. And I've been proud of all of you and all the work that you guys, that we've done together. With this issue, I know how, how hard our grocery store workers have been. And for those companies that have been, making profits because of, in the beginning of this pandemic, that people were, panic buying and, their sales went up. I think that they absolutely should be doing the right thing and increasing the wages of their workers. I'm glad to see that many of them during those times increased, gave them bonus pays. And some of those companies have even carried that bonus pay all the way until today. What I am afraid of is the unintended consequences of this, and really hitting the areas, those low to moderate economic areas, where I'm afraid that this ordinance is going to affect the prices of the people who can least afford it. And, I would, love the opportunity to try to really take a look and hopefully come back to this council trying to figure out ways to make sure that we somehow carve out a possible exemption for some of these smaller businesses, not the Krogers and the Albertsons of the world, who are making record profits. I'm talking about the businesses that when Ralph's and the Krogers and the Albertsons left those communities, the markets that came back into their place. And, but like any decision that we make here on City Council, everything has different edges to it. The people who work in these stores in the low, moderate income areas, those are the people who need this $5 the most. And to just simply say that those stores can't have it, and the stores maybe in my district, get the raise, that's not fair. But I think there are other ways that we can possibly look at this, maybe giving exemptions, maybe it'd be gross receipts tax exemptions to some of these businesses, because I don't want to affect the grocery store workers that work in those areas because they need it the most. But I also don't want it to affect the people who live in those communities, where I'm afraid that all these companies possibly could leave at if they have underperforming stores, could lay off people in order to make the numbers work with them if they're now paying $5 more an hour. I'm worried about the lawsuit that is currently being heard right now, and hopefully we will get a decision sometime soon, hopefully by this week. There's a lot of different concerns that I have with moving this forward. I absolutely am with all of you, 100%, that the grocery store workers in our city have been the absolute heroes during this pandemic. They have faced more public than anyone else. And that's why I think it's been our important role that we put in all the different safety precautions, the shields, the mandatory masks, the hand washing stations, throughout the delivery areas. And, I think, again, we've done so much to try to protect them. But at the end, I don't want to affect the people who are going to be hurt the most by this. And that is the people who live in the poorest communities of the city of Los Angeles. The people who live in my district, we've been able to afford that increase, but we've all seen that increase. And my biggest fear is for the hardworking families in those areas, and that we as a city also understand that when we do things like this, which are what I believe to be gross overreach of government into businesses and what they should be paying their employees. When I go out, or when all of you go out to recruit businesses to try to come to the city, they often look at the actions that we take as a council and make the decision on whether they want to make that investment in our city to come somewhere where, our government makes those kind of decisions for them. So, I hope that we can try to figure out something, down the line, but today I am going to be registering a no vote. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. Mr. Price?
Let me just start by thanking you for your leadership on this issue. You certainly have been a very strong advocate, and I want to applaud the members of my committee, Economic Development and Jobs Committee, who heard this matter yesterday and who engaged in a robust discussion of what it meant. Since the moment we introduced legislation for Los Angeles hazard pay, a battle between profit margins over people has been waged. And depending on which side you're on, which data is referenced, in the court of public opinion, there are multiple sides to every story. For myself, there's only one reality under these circumstances, and that's the immense risks and danger that our grocery workers are exposed to every time they clock in. For too long, we've balanced the weight of the pandemic on the shoulders of workers who've had to discount their own lives for the sake of everyone else's. The CLA report that we reviewed and received found that the mortality rate for Latino workers in food and agriculture has gone up by 59% because of this pandemic, and for Black workers in retail by 36%. Those are not small numbers. The CLA report also cited the grocery store sector has had an increase, 11.2% increase in sales in 2020 over the previous year. Providing these workers with $5 hazard pay for the next 120 days is the least we can do. And our hope is that by the time this policy concludes, we'll have many of our workers vaccinated, again, based on President Biden's plan. It's time, members, that the city of LA joined with many other jurisdictions across the Golden State and our very own county, which passed a $5 hero pay policy yesterday, and showed these workers that we recognize their sacrifice and their hard work. And let me just say, you know, there are a number of jurisdictions that have implemented this hero pay over the past several weeks. And there's no evidence, that prices are going to go up or folks are being laid off because of it. So members, I'm just asking you to step up and I ask for your aye vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Price. Mr. Koretz? Mr. Koretz? Mr. Koretz, you're muted.
Sorry about that. I had some technical difficulties. Thank you, Madam President, and my colleagues, Mr. Price and Mr. O'Farrell, for presenting this and having me be allowed to join you. The chances of being a grocery worker and contracting COVID are 5 times that of the general population in Los Angeles. And yet these people keep doing their jobs. They come in with a high risk, and no one signed up to risk their lives to bag groceries or operate a checkout line. But yet they've kept coming, and they've kept our lives as functional as possible, and it's been absolutely critical. Supermarkets, as we all note, have made high profits, and yet some are threatening to close. It's clearly out of spite or out of an attempt to leverage us. It's not because a few months of $5 an hour will dramatically affect their bottom line at all, especially in the long term. Get past a few months, make a little less massive profit, and treat your workers fairly. It's really about time. It's something we have to do and show some leadership. This is a way to recognize the hazards that grocery workers are facing every day and to thank them for their service. And so I am sure we will pass this item. It is such a no-brainer. And anyone that tells you that supermarkets are going to be dramatically impacted is just snowing you from the industry. They can survive this for a few months, and they have to. So thank you all for considering this item, and I look forward to its passage.
Mr. Ridley Thomas?
Madam President, please join in supporting item number 4. As we all know, frontline grocery and retail workers continue to remain at what should be considered high risk of hazard and arguably dangerous circumstances, no matter the claim that the virus is retreating, or that is, we are containing it. Fact of the matter is, the data makes it clear, and the region we know is Southern California, some 5,500 grocery retail workers have contracted the virus, and hundreds have, literally hundreds, have perished. Now, this is certainly not the job that many anticipated they would be signing up for, Madam President and colleagues. And it seems to me, while the vaccine rollout is underway, many of the essential workers have not yet qualified to get their vaccination. It underscores demographic realities. It underscores the issue of racial and ethnic disproportionality. And we need to be attentive to that in our policymaking work. As the CLA report makes clear, this ordinance comes with trade-offs for both retailers and employees. Pros and cons with anything we do, but it should be appreciated that this effort is a temporary measure that increases wages of grocery and retail workers, and we want to underscore that it is a matter of justice. It is our way of saying we affirm you, and all labor has dignity. And bolder policy changes may in fact be needed to support our most vulnerable and essential workers in the long term. We know that, we attend to that. It's under a broader umbrella of worker rights and economic justice, but we must be attentive to that. But I would simply settle for this for now, Madam President, as an important signal and step in the direction in which we must be headed. It's the right step in the short term to provide our frontline workers with family-sustaining wages they deserve during this unrelenting crisis. Might I just simply quote someone who we are fond of quoting, "It's always the right time to do the right thing." Madam President, we thank you for your leadership. Those who are co-authors and seconders, we acknowledge your weighing in as well. Madam President, thank you for the opportunity to be heard on this matter.
Thank you, Mr. O'Farrell.
Thank you, Madam President. Colleagues, this is as serious as it gets. As good as the news has been lately with vaccines rolling out and infections plummeting, there are variant strains in California that are more easily transmissible and possibly more virulent than the initial COVID-19 pandemic strains. We'll need to carefully monitor the developing science on this issue over the next 120 days, but one thing is certain: we will all continue to frequent grocery stores and supermarkets along with pharmacies, and these workers will continue to be there for us, no matter what, as they have been over the past 11 months. These workers interact with hundreds of people from around the city that depend on them with little or no control over their work environment. Anyone who has ever worked in a high-volume retail environment, like I have in my past, understands there are always hostile behaviors from some customer interactions, which again, these workers have little or no control over whatsoever. We already know about the out-of-proportion illnesses and mortalities that have befallen grocery workers and their families. We absolutely need to be there for them. Virtually everyone, along with workers in other industries in LA, have been able to stay safer at home because of these very workers who show up day after day and make sure that we have uninterrupted access to essential supplies. And again, specifically, we're talking about grocery and drug retail stores with over 300 employees nationwide who have made record profits from this pandemic. Concurrently, their workers and their families continue to experience higher rates of COVID-19, which, as I said, we've all said, have resulted in illness and death. Our essential workers deserve to be justly compensated for this risk, and providing premium hazard pay over the next 120 days is really the least we can do. And again, we need to monitor this very carefully. And from all of our lips to God's ears, this really is the light at the end of the tunnel, and we'll be coming out of this. So these workers are going to need this hazard pay for at least the next 4 months. And so along with all of you, colleagues, I ask for your aye vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Cedillo?
Madam Chair, thank you so much. Obviously, ditto to everything that everyone has said. I think it's important, and I applaud your efforts in working on this. It's good news to know that the Costco and Los Feliz will be paying its workers for all that they do. It's good news to know that the Walmart in Panorama City will pay the workers this hero pay. It's good news to know that the 59 Target stores will be paying the workers the additional money. This is great news, and I'm very proud and excited about this. But I do want to give a comment with respect to what Mr. Lee said, that this is not a one-size-fits-all, that having worked in this industry, it is a little more complex, that there are communities in this city, and as we say this at almost every meeting, not everything is the same everywhere. So, Mr. Koretz, you may not have a problem having a supermarket in Westwood, but I can't get one in Chinatown. I'm struggling to get one in Pico Union. I know Mr. De Leon would love to have one in Boyle Heights. And so there is that reality. And so while I support this wholeheartedly, I want us to also recognize that reality, that we have ethnic supermarkets that serve certain niches in our city, that we have small mom and pop supermarkets, that we have food deserts. And so, for example, when the Walmart made a business decision to leave Chinatown, they left a void. And so what we have there is a gym, an exercise gym, but we don't have a supermarket for the residents of Chinatown. And we need that. And so this does not deter me from voting for this policy, but this does call for me to acknowledge these realities, the nuances involved, the complexities involved here, and to call for us to think about making this better. Think about tax policy, the power of the tax policy we have within the city to perhaps subsidize some of these ethnic stores. Think about the COVID relief plan, and perhaps we could work with that to look at solutions for bringing or sustaining stores within our neighborhoods. Look at just the overall economic development strategies of the city. Think about that. These points have been well made. The challenges of those on the front line are tremendous. And I would also note, as we've seen recently here in my district, the challenge of the anti-vaxxers who seem to think that they can walk around with impunity, that somehow they have First Amendment rights that are greater than the First Amendment rights of those who either live in their homes and have a right to live peacefully in their homes, like you, Madam President, with your neighbors, or the First Amendment rights of those, freedom of association, freedom of religion, who have a right to have access to health care, as I saw this morning again, disrupting the right of seniors in Chinatown to get their shots. This is disruptive. This is interfering. We take the calls from people in the community who say that they're intimidated, they don't want to go to Dodger Stadium, they don't want to go to these places because they don't want to be confronted with protesters. So frontline workers in the retail industry have had that pressed upon them. They have signed up to do their jobs in that industry, not to be the cops of the anti-vaxxers or the anti-mask wearers. And we should note all these points. I raise them for us to say that this is a great proposal. I'm supporting it 100%, but I also think that it can be better because we have to make sure that we come out of this period looking to eliminate food deserts, looking to recognize the diversity of our city, and looking to make sure that the economic development that comes out of the post-COVID era ensures that every worker is treated with the dignity and respect they deserve. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your leadership on this matter.
Mr. De Leon?
Thank you very much, Madam President, as well as colleagues, for the opportunity to just share a few words. I want to ditto the comments of my colleague, Neil Cedillo, with regards to the lack, obviously, of large, conglomerates, supermarket chains in low-income food desert communities. I want to put this in context for all of us, but especially the citizens of LA, with regards to the cost factor. Kroger, one of the largest, food retailers in the world, ended its $2 per hour hero pay in mid-May of last year, 2020, despite its profits doubling to $2.6 billion and spending nearly $1 billion in 2020, last year, to buy back its own stock shares. So these are record windfall profits. They spent over twice the amount on stock buybacks as they did on providing hazard pay and bonuses to their 435,000 workers. In other words, with their profits, they spent more on themselves than they have on their workers. Now, the current CEO for Kroger's is Rodney McMullen, and he took home $21 million in 2019. Now, obviously, that was before the pandemic, but he makes about 789 times as much as money as the average Kroger employee. But somehow, some way, large conglomerates like Kroger can't afford to give an extra $4 to $5 per hour to workers literally sacrificing their lives. Now, many of my colleagues have been so articulate and so passionate in describing precisely and most accurately what is happening with our essential frontline workers every single day. Now, because of the coronavirus, because of the pandemic, the shelter-in-place edict, the average amount of meals for Southern Californians went from 10 meals per week at home to 21 meals per week at home. So therefore, if there was an industry that reaped a tremendous amount of profits and it wasn't hurt, it was the food retail industry. And according to the Brookings Institution report out of DC, profits of the largest 13 retail grocery chains earned an additional $17 billion in the first 3 quarters of the year 2020. An additional $17 billion in the first 3 quarters of 2020, last year, during the global pandemic. That's a 49% increase in profits in comparison to 2019. So the money's there. It's a question of priorities. This is a moment when we step up for each other, we back each other up as Americans. It's quite un-American when there's a windfall of profits and you can't give a little extra few dollars, which is only temporary until this pandemic is over. It's only for a handful of months. So that's why I stand proudly with all of my colleagues who have made comments today as we express not just our solidarity, but clear statutory direction to say if you're a supermarket chain, especially a conglomerate to the point, in the city of LA, that you shall treat your workers with a modicum of dignity and respect. Thank you very much, Madam President.
Mr. Blumenfield?
Thank you. I rise in strong support of this measure. I appreciate what everyone has said so far, and on all levels. I mean, Mr. De Leon made a lot of good points about the profit margin, but I also appreciate what Mr. Cedillo said about the nuance here, and that, I'm generally very reluctant for us to get in the middle of the business relationship, the contract relationship, especially with unionized workers, because we're big believers in collective bargaining. But this is a crisis situation. This is an emergency, and we need to act. That doesn't mean we shouldn't be aware of all these other nuances. I think they're mitigated by the fact that this is a temporary measure. It's 120 days. These companies can handle that. But yes, every action has a reaction. And we don't want that reaction to be the loss of critical stores. We don't want that reaction to be some sort of other something that hurts the workers. And we're not experts in this. We're not gonna be able to predict all of the reactions that happen from our actions. But that being said, these workers have been put in an extraordinary situation during this pandemic. We never used to think of frontline workers as including grocery workers, but clearly it does. And so this is a measure to recognize that, to make sure that the hazards that they have endured and continue to endure are rewarded to some extent. And I think it is a reasonable thing to do. And I'm proud to support this and to support our hardworking grocery store workers. And I was happy to work this out in committee to make sure that it was more expansive and that included the Targets and other related stores so that it wasn't just limited to specific grocery stores. But with that, we will carefully monitor it, and we'll see what happens, and we'll make sure that we watch what the reactions are and we respond accordingly. But with that, I support this, support our workers, and I ask for your aye vote.
Mr. Harris Dawson?
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Price, for the work to bring this before us. I'll ask those of you who were in committee last night to pardon me because I'm going to repeat much of what I said. But much of the conversation to me has given rise to this and frankly gotten me a little bit hot under the collar. The notion that the way you stand up for low-income neighborhoods and low-income people is by suggesting that they get paid less to work in their neighborhoods is the height of insulting. It just so happens that those low-income areas are also the places where people have COVID the most and where they're getting vaccinated the least. So you're saying the workers with the most risk aren't going to get the hazard pay. And the workers with the least risk in the areas of the city where COVID is lower are going to get the hazard pay. It's just challenging that we have folks who look at our economy in this way and look at it in such an upside down sort of way and ask the people who are bearing the brunt of the problem to forego the benefits. These folks who want to help these low-income areas advocate for full-time childcare after this is over so families can make up for what they've lost in the year. Advocate for a living wage for everybody, no matter what kind of work they do. Advocate for the banks to forgive mortgages for people who've fallen behind. That's how you advocate for poor people. You don't advocate for poor people by asking them to get paid less. I just want to make sure we know that. And you don't codify apartheid. We don't do that in the United States. We don't have a thing where we say, well, if you live and work over here, you're going to make less than the people who live or work over there. You just don't do it. And yes, the corporations will do all kinds of things and go through all types of machinations, but we should not treat their behavior as if it's rational, because it is not. At the time when Walmart closed the store in Chinatown, they also closed the store on Crenshaw. Two things were true at that time. One, they were almost the richest company in the world. Two, they had just gotten a big tax cut from the Bush administration. So how rich do we have to let them be before they'll give people food? Like literally, like this is a serious discussion we need to have. They got to be the richest corporation by 20%, and then we can get a grocery store? Like what do we have to provide them? I would suggest to you that they're not rational actors. They're acting out of greed, and you can't let our decisions be predicated on how they behave or not. And again, I understand that those implications are serious. I represented an area that has borne the brunt of corporate greed. But the idea that we're going to make policy in a way that facilitates their behavior, I think is backwards and lowers the quality of life for all the people that we say we want to represent in it. And again, my apologies, everyone, for being repetitive and argumentative, but this is a way in which our community gets pressured and pressured and pressured and pressured and pressured. And I think this pandemic has gotten us to the breaking point. So I think everybody who's intends to support this motion and everybody who's gotten behind it from the community, I think it's just the beginning of what needs to be done to make things right for the people who are borne the brunt of this pandemic.
Amen, Mr. Harris Dawson. Thank you for that. Mr. Krikorian?
I was going to ask, Madam President, if they had an emoji that said preach.
Say that too? Can I get a witness? Preach? Amen. Hallelujah. Mr. Krikorian.
Thank you, Madam President. I first and foremost want to thank Councilmember Price, who has pushed this through and who led a committee effort that was thoughtful, that was thorough, in which so many of these issues that the members are discussing today were well thought out. So I want to thank him for his leadership on this. And all of the members who've spoken have raised important reasons why we should advance a policy like this. And they're all good and they're all sufficient as far as I'm concerned. I would say that there's one thread that kind of ties together many of the comments that have been offered, and that is the extraordinary moment that we're living in right now and the need for these most essential workers to continue to do this essential work. And when we look at the great risk that they're facing, there's a tremendous natural human incentive when you have to, show up for work every day, expose yourself to this virus every day, expose yourself to obnoxious customers who refuse to wear masks to make some sort of political statement in your store, in your face. As these workers are facing all that, there's a natural human incentive for them to say, maybe I should work someplace else other than in the grocery industry or at a drugstore. And that impacts everyone. So this impacts, yes, the work, this benefits the workers who are working in those industries, yes, but this impacts every citizen of Los Angeles. And the action that we're taking today, this short-term temporary action, ensures the continuity of our food supply for all of our residents. It ensures that people stay on the job and not go elsewhere. It ensures that we have ready access in all parts of the city to food, to essential drugs and other items. So I think that alone would be enough of a reason to support this measure. And the fact that it's only for a short term, yes, there's other things we could do for the long haul. This council, led the state really in advancing a $15 minimum wage. And that became the model that the state then adopted. And hopefully it'll be the model for the rest of the nation as well. There's many things that we could do like that and should continue to work towards. But right now, this is an emergency situation. And it will continue to be an emergency situation for the next few months. And it's just essential that we maintain the integrity of that supply of food and drugs for all of our residents. And this is an important step forward to doing that. So if you agree with that principle, I hope you'll support the important work that has been put into this measure and that you'll vote aye.
Thank you, Mr. Krikorian. Mr. Lee?
Thank you, Madam President. I just want to make sure that my comments are not mischaracterized by the comments by my colleague, Councilmember Harris Dawson, that when I make the statement, I clearly stated that one area should not be paid less than another area, or one community should not, and that was the issue that we were facing here today. And so I'm sure that my colleague wasn't addressing those comments towards me, because what I was trying to say is that what we need to do is think of a different way to maybe give back to those communities so that we don't see an increase in prices in those communities, but that their workers receive the same wages. By no means do I think that those companies should be exempted and simply just, their workers get paid less than workers in other parts of the city. And so I wanted to make that clear that my intention is not that. My intention is to make sure that the people in our poorest communities don't get impacted the most by the increase of prices or the possible loss of jobs and income that this could possibly have within their communities in places where these companies are not, they're opposite of the larger companies where 80% of their employees are full-time employees and not the 20% that we see in some of the larger chains. And that we support these companies that support, our communities, especially the communities that need it the most and need to make sure that we don't provide the thing that we all have fought for so many years, that these areas where there are these food deserts where people can't get fresh produce, and to, promote healthy eating habits. This is something that, I just wanted to make sure that my comments were not taken out of context and were clear in what I'm trying to accomplish or what, the reasons why, I am taking the vote that I'm taking today. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. And I just want to commend Mr. Price for your extraordinary work in committee, sir. Thank you very much for pushing this through and getting it to council this morning. And Mr. Harris Dawson, I could not agree with you more. I completely share your frustration. I think I was also getting a little hot under the collar as I was listening to some of these comments. But the fact that just last month, during the height of the surge, we had nearly 150 separate breakouts in grocery stores. 150 separate outbreaks of people who had been either infected or are in the hospital or contracted the virus at work. All you have to do is go to a funeral of someone who died from COVID, visit with a family who is going through it, talk to anyone standing in a food line, and have them describe what it feels like to have to go to work and feel like you're going to possibly die from this virus. So what is a life worth? Is it $2, $4, $5 for someone who actually provides a necessity for you to live with? I think it's kind of shameful, if you'd ask me, about the lobbying effort on behalf of the grocery stores in terms of what they think they've put into trying to make things safer in their grocery stores and the consequences that will come of it if we enact on this ordinance. It's time to act now, members. I ask for your aye vote. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Blumenfield.
Blumenfield, aye.
Bonin.
Bonin, absolutely yes.
Buscaino.
Aye.
Cedillo.
Cedillo, aye.
De Leon.
Aye.
Harris Dawson.
Yes.
Koretz.
Aye.
Krikorian.
Aye.
Lee.
No.
Martinez.
Aye.
O'Farrell.
Aye.
Price.
Aye.
Rahman.
Aye.
Ridley Thomas.
Aye.
Rodriguez.
Aye.
14 ayes, 1 no. This item is adopted as amended, and the ordinance will be held over 1 week to March 3rd for a second reading.
Next item is item number 5. This was called special by Mr. O'Farrell.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you so much. Bear with me here for a second, sorry. Colleagues, President Martinez, Councilmember Rodriguez, and I partnered on this motion that resulted in this report before us because of our strong support for undocumented immigrant residents of the city of Los Angeles. The city and the state of California have to deliver for this community in spite of the funding restrictions currently from the federal government. I also want to thank Mr. Price for so quickly hearing this report and for your dedication and focus to those living in your district, especially the undocumented among us in our immigrant communities. Colleagues, the CLA report is very comprehensive. It lays out a path for more inclusion, representation, and most of all, accountability for us as a body to ensure that we're vigilant and responsible in creating programs and policy that protects this vulnerable segment of our population. With today's action and with the COVID-19 pandemic still raging, the CLA's first in-depth look, working with nonprofit partners and community stakeholders to improve outreach and service delivery, will help this council do its job and keep people fed, housed, and safe, regardless of immigration status. So colleagues, I look forward to the upcoming reports from the CLA and the newly created Department of Civil and Human Rights, Economic Development Department, HCID, and others to improve our service reach to the thousands of people in need throughout Los Angeles who are often thought of as invisible and certainly often feel invisible. I ask for an aye vote. Thank you.
Mr. De Leon?
Thank you very much, Madam President. I want to thank our colleague, Mr. Farrell, for bringing file item number 5 forward. Let me state the following. It is cruel, not only cruel, but it is also very neglectful for any federal coronavirus legislation to have purposely left out undocumented immigrants, many who have been at the front lines as farm workers, as grocery workers, as health workers, risking their lives throughout this pandemic. And while it is important to celebrate the fact that U.S. citizens or permanent resident members and mixed status families were made eligible for assistance back in December during that coronavirus legislation, the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2021, they should never have been denied assistance. Yet undocumented immigrants continue to be excluded from receiving federal aid, even with the current markup in Washington, D.C. as we speak right now. Now, we know that's fluid and that's dynamic, but that nonetheless, we look and we read what's before us. And I want to underscore the following, especially because we're in the city of LA, because undocumented immigrants play such a huge role. If you live on the West Side, they park your cars. They clean your homes. They cut your grass. They serve your meals. They take care of your children. They take care of the elderly, the very wealthy elderly, like my mother did, when no one else in the family wants to take care of them. It doesn't make a difference if you're a vegan, a vegetarian, a pescatarian, or carnivore. It was an undocumented immigrant who picked that food for you, who served that food, who cooked that food before you got to Gelson's, before you got to Whole Foods, before you got to your Saturday farmers markets, or whatever supermarket chain. It was an undocumented immigrant. And the very fact they played such an outsized role in LA and are the pillar of our economy, that for them to be excluded at this moment is unconscionable. So I commend Mr. Farrell for bringing this up. I support the CLA's efforts to figure out how we can make sure that we incorporate them in any assistance program, because to the point that Mr. Marquise Harris Dawson just mentioned a few moments ago, these are the folks who are dying with the highest infection rates, and they're the ones who are actually dying the highest numbers. Yet they're not receiving a single penny, and they prop up our economy. Moreover, if any citizen or resident receives unemployment insurance, well, they paid into that pot. So they're helping to prop up that fund, yet they're not able to even draw down on that. And that's a state issue right there, But I just want to say thank you and just highlight their role, because oftentimes they are viewed as invisible in a city like LA, Hollywood, Tinseltown, and all the creative class. And they're viewed as invisible residents and citizens of the city of LA. It's time that stops. Thank you, Madam President.
Mr. Cedillo?
Mr. De Leon, thank you for your eloquence on this point. It is disturbing that for all the rhetoric, that there is not support for the undocumented community, both in Los Angeles and throughout the country. 11 million people toil, as Mr. De Leon has eloquently stated. The foundation of, as he said, anybody who eats, the foundation of their food. Also for the great city of Los Angeles, they're the foundation of our service economy. They take care of other people's children and other people's parents. They take the first bus and come home on the last bus. We must then, in the absence of support from the feds, figure out here in Los Angeles how we can lift them up and make sure that this rising tide that we anticipate lifts all boats. There is important state policy that is being developed today in Sacramento, and that must do more. Because if we can't get support from the feds, we simply have to get support from the state to make sure that we can ensure that there is services and protection. It's appalling. Two things are appalling. One is that immigrants pay taxes and that they're unable to benefit from those taxes. Two, that for all the benefits of the ACA, the Obamacare, that there were provisions that were written into it that prohibited immigrants from buying health insurance. What type of society, what type of laws are we writing that prohibit healthcare, access to healthcare and access to health insurance for such a large and significant part of our population? We just heard all of us wax so eloquently in defense of frontline workers, and the frontline workers in this city are the undocumented workers. Thank you, Madam President.
Okay, let's go ahead and prepare and vote on this item. Item number 5, please call the roll.
Blumenfield.
Blumenfield, aye.
Bonin.
Bonin, aye.
Buscaino.
Aye.
Cedillo.
Aye.
De Leon.
Aye.
Harris Dawson.
Yes.
Koretz.
Aye.
Krikorian.
Aye.
Lee.
Aye.
Martinez.
Aye.
O'Farrell.
Aye.
Price.
Aye.
Rahman.
Aye.
Ridley Thomas.
Aye.
Rodriguez.
Aye.
15 ayes. This item is adopted.
Okay, let's move on to item 11, called special by Mr. Ridley Thomas.
Madam President and colleagues, I want to take a moment to highlight the importance of Assembly Bill 71, which this council has the opportunity to lend its official support to today. We thank you, Madam President, and you, Mr. O'Farrell, for your seconding the item before us. You'll know that AB 71 is authored by Assembly Member Luz Rivas. It's essentially a fundamental claim in the fight to end what many of us view to be the moral crisis of our time, namely that of homelessness. Now, if approved, colleagues, it will generate $2.4 billion annually by closing corporate tax loopholes and restoring historic corporate tax rates on corporations with 5 million or more in profits. This measure would establish a permanent source of funding for fighting homelessness across the length and breadth of this state. AB 71's aims are ambitious. We don't apologize for that. We need to step up our game, as it were, when we talk about leaning in to fight against homelessness, the fight to restore dignity and purpose to the lives of those who are subjected to unspeakable conditions. Therefore, it's a good thing. This new funding would be aimed at preventing some 28 1,000 people from falling into homelessness, finding interim housing for as many as 25,000 people, creating affordable housing units for some 43,000 people, and in addition to that, providing navigation, case management, and employment support for over some 50,000 people. Simply stated, Madam President and colleagues, these resources would make the difference for us in deploying a crisis response that would finally help more people to come off the streets, to come indoors, in comparison to the state of affairs that we can currently contend with, more people falling in than those that we can help come out. So I think this is a resource question. If we want to be serious, we have to have resources. Anyone who says that they want to go in on the question of homelessness and sends you a blank check, it's just simply not serious. We can do much better than we have done. The state has to, and this is an effort to make that as clear as possible. It is high time that we lean in more effectively than we have. We passed Proposition Triple H when we passed Measure H, the city and county respectively. Somebody said we had so much money we thought we had died and gone to heaven. Well, we quickly found out that that wasn't the case. It was insufficient. Therefore, we need to appeal to the state to do more than it has done. This is not to suggest that the state hasn't been engaged. The governor and the legislature have, over the past 2 years, invested more in homelessness than had been done in the preceding gubernatorial administrations, going back a minimum of 2+ decades. So this is a question of more. Why more? Because it's needed. Why more? Because it's essentially necessary. Why more? Because if we wish to make good on our claims that we are stepping forward to do all that we can to arrest this homeless crisis, it seems to me that in part means at this hour that we support AB 71. Madam President, thank you for the opportunity to be heard. Colleagues, I urge a unanimous support for this resolution, and I thank you.
Mr. O'Farrell?
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you, Mr. Ridley Thomas, for, I'm honored to co-present this, resolution in support of Assembly Bill 71 along with you as a pioneer and a leader across the state in terms of addressing the homeless crises that we all face here in the city of Los Angeles. This item will advance our city's efforts to effectively address this crisis, which is only going to get worse despite the progress that we're making in terms of the rapid rehousing, et cetera. We know that there are so many forces that we must deal with in this crisis. Mr. Ridley Thomas mentioned the HHH pipeline and the progress there. Even once we get to the 10,000 units, and we will, that will house about 14,000 people. So to think that we could, with this AB 71 projections, find permanent housing for another 25,000 households, that's really hugely significant considering the city of LA has, of last count, 41,000 people experiencing homelessness living within the city limits. When we're talking about those kinds of numbers, and especially if we go the more innovative and cost-effective approach to produce housing and do rehabilitation of existing structures to provide that housing, we're talking about really making significant progress in addressing the homelessness crises. I think it's worth noting that prior to COVID-19, as I mentioned, 41,000 people in the city alone experiencing homelessness, and we know that the pandemic has only exacerbated that issue. And according to a study last year by UCLA Luskin School, the most optimistic estimate, according to that study, is that 36,000 renter households in LA County could become homeless due to the effects of the coronavirus. And I think a theme of today is that with that, people of color will once again likely be overrepresented in this terrible scenario. So it's incumbent upon us to do everything we can now, in the near future and in the far future, to prevent making that statistic a reality. And we're doing just that with support of AB 71, which goes along with much of the work that this council has done over the past several years since HHH and H were approved by voters. And this includes the lobbying efforts to Sacramento since 2019 that I've led to make sure that Los Angeles gets its fair share. And AB 71 gets us closer to that goal. The city of Los Angeles, we have upwards of a third of the state's homeless population. You hear me say that a lot, but never have we, the city, received funding commensurate with our need. So we really have to stay in the business of advocacy and production. And passage of this bill will help us get there. So colleagues, I also ask for an aye vote so we can continue this work and pressure our colleagues in Sacramento to prioritize addressing the homelessness crises in very real ways for the city of Los Angeles. Thank you. Thank you, Madam President.
Mr. De Leon?
Thank you very much, Madam President. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you to our chair of the Homeless and Poverty Committee, Marley Thomas, as well as my colleague Mitchell Farrell for bringing this measure. I'm going to support this measure. It's in its nascent stage, as we know. We know the framework is needed with regards to the amount of resources, but there's a lot of devil in the details still that have to be taken care of right now. I want to be very clear. It's in its nascent stage, and I've received numerous phone calls from my colleagues in both chambers, both the Senate as well as the Assembly, on some of the concerns and lack of undefined outcomes, which is very critical. One of my biggest regrets, I will say, colleagues, as the author of No Place Like Home, which became Proposition 2, which was voted on by the electorate in 2018, was there was no defined outcomes with regards to the $2.2 billion that was disseminated through the counties, the 58 counties throughout the state of California. So I just want to say the measure, we like the amount of money. I think that MRT articulated very nicely with regards to ongoing as opposed to one-time funding, but we have to have very clear defined outcomes on the measure. It's in its nascent stage right now, so I think we should support it, but there's much room for continued negotiations on the measure. And really want to make sure that it doesn't undermine Senate Bill 1380, which is the housing right for all, by then State Senator Holly Mitchell, who's now obviously serving as the county board of supervisor. So the money sounds good. We want to make sure it doesn't undermine, and we have clear, defined outcomes so we can measure our success. So I do, again, just want to emphasize thanking Mr. Marley Thomas as well as Mitchell Farrell for your presentation today. I will be voting for it with the caveat and the asterisk because we're in the nascent stage of this measure. Thank you, Madam President.
Please prepare to vote on this item, item number 11. Please call the roll.
Blumenfield.
Blumenfield, aye.
Bonin.
Bonin, aye.
Buscaino.
Aye.
Cedillo. Cedillo. Cedillo.
Gil, unmute.
Cedillo.
Yes.
No, there's some
Hold on.
good things on it, obviously.
De Leon.
He was on the phone.
All right.
Harris Dawson.
Yes.
Koretz.
Cedillo, yes, Madam President.
Thank you. Koretz.
Aye.
Krikorian,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Martinez,
Aye.
O'Farrell,
Absolutely. Thank you.
Price,
Aye.
Rahman,
Aye.
Ridley Thomas,
Aye.
Rodriguez.
Aye.
15 ayes. This item is adopted.
Okay, let's move on to item 14, call special by Mr. O'Farrell.
Thank you, Madam President. Colleagues, just a few brief remarks about our ailing small theater community in Los Angeles. I think what isn't always understood by people widely is that Los Angeles has traditionally one of the most thriving, important, groundbreaking class of theaters, directors, and creators in our small theater community across the whole district. Now, I have the great benefit of representing Theater Row in Hollywood, and back in the day, in the 1980s, I performed on some of those stages in locally written and produced plays. And as the representative of Hollywood, I really understand what those small theaters and small theater companies are up against. Now, they've been devastated, not just at Theater Row, but across the city by the COVID-19 pandemic. Always operating on a shoestring budget as it is, small theaters have always survived month to month. Some have permanently closed. More will permanently close, unfortunately. But just we have to remember that traditionally they've had limited funding. There have been no performances in front of live audiences for over 11 months. Mass layoffs, zero revenue, and not even the ability to hold special events because of the county health restrictions. So we're building upon other city-wide and Council District 13 specific programs. So establishing this emergency grant program for $5,000 grants to the small theater community in my district is really important and timely, especially at the place in the pandemic that we are. I also want to pay tribute to Mr. Krikorian for his successful program in the NoHo Arts District, which this program is modeled after. And we thank Mr. Krikorian for showing the way. And I'm hopeful that we can create more funding for the creative community in Los Angeles that isn't necessarily known for worldwide cinema or television, but operate below the radar, nonprofits, struggling arts groups. That needs to be an area of focus of ours. If you would like my opinion, the creative class in Los Angeles needs to be strongly supported. So colleagues, I ask for an aye vote, and I just really also want to pay tribute to all of those that toil every day to keep these small theaters functioning and from going under. And this small grant will help in the 13th district. I ask for an aye vote. Thank you, Madam President.
Okay, let's prepare to vote on this item. Item 14, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Blumenfield,
Blumenfield, aye.
Bonin,
Bonin, aye.
Buscaino,
Aye.
Cedillo.
Aye. Cedillo, aye.
Thank you. De Leon,
Aye.
Harris Dawson,
Yes.
Koretz,
Aye.
Krikorian,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Martinez,
Aye.
O'Farrell,
Aye.
Price,
Aye.
Rahman,
Aye.
Ridley Thomas,
Aye.
Rodriguez.
Aye.
15 ayes. This item is adopted.
Okay, let's move on to item 20. This was called special by Ms. Rodriguez.
Thank you, Madam President and colleagues. Very simply, I wanted to bring attention to this item because I want to remind us all about the opportunity that we have to use publicly owned assets for the purposes of communicating and connecting residents to the resources that they need. And homelessness obviously is the number one issue that is affecting so many individuals, both on our streets, but frankly, families that we haven't even identified yet, that are on the verge and on the brink of homelessness as a result of the impact of the economic difficulties associated with the pandemic. You know, it's really hard for folks to navigate what resources are available, and they genuinely don't know. And whether it is connecting them to a local resource hub, like the one that we've created here in the Northeast Valley at North Valley Caring Services, or understanding what resources are available to via the county, through LAHSA, or accessible to by any one of the service providers or spa leads. We need to be utilizing more of our public assets and making higher and better use of what we already have available at our disposal to communicate to residents. And so this motion is about connecting those assets with LAHSA to help do a public education campaign on the resources that are currently available for those experiencing homelessness or seeking additional resources and support. And I just want to remind everybody, because sometimes it's the very simple things that we might overlook, that we can make much better fiscal, prudent decisions if we look to what we already have available in our toolbox to communicate to folks. And I know this has been a challenge with respect to how we disseminate information on COVID-related relief as well, and even vaccines. But with the contracts that we currently have in place, this is available at our disposal to help provide public announcements. And so this motion is directing the Bureau of Street Services to work with LAHSA to help do just that. And I look forward to additional campaigns being made available online for us to promote in all these ways, because again, you know, it's far more prudent for us to have consistent messaging and making that widely available through the promotional opportunities that we have on our bus shelters, looking at some of our banners. I know we all leverage that differently, but this is a simple and singular way that we can use already publicly owned assets to help get that information out. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Let's prepare to vote on this items, members. Item number 20. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Blumenfield.
Blumenfield, aye.
Bonin.
Bonin, aye.
Buscaino.
Aye.
Cedillo.
Cedillo, aye.
De Leon.
Aye.
Harris Dawson.
Yes.
Koretz.
Aye.
Krikorian.
Aye.
Lee.
Aye.
Martinez.
Aye.
O'Farrell.
Aye.
Price.
Aye.
Rahman.
Aye.
Ridley Thomas.
Aye.
Rodriguez.
Aye.
15 ayes. This item is adopted.
Okay, Madam Clerk, what's before us now?
Council has motions for posting and referral. Motions will be posted on the City Clerk's website shortly after the meeting for the public's viewing. To subscribe to receive copies of today's council motions to your email, please visit clerk.lacity.org.
Okay, posted and refers. Members, are there any adjournments? I'm sorry, announcements. Mr. Cedillo? Do you have an announcement, Mr. Cedillo?
Adjournment, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to Mr. Ridley Thomas. Do you have an announcement?
German, man.
All right, we're going to move on to adjournments. I've got Mr. Ridley Thomas, followed by Mr. O'Farrell and Mr. Cedillo and Mr. De Leon. Go ahead, Mr. Ridley Thomas.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'd like to adjourn in honor of Officer Robert William Stewart, who is among the first Black officers to join the LAPD in the year of 1889. Though he served honorably, Madam President, Officer Stewart was stripped of his career and after being charged, tried, and later acquitted of assaulting a teenage girl. The LAPD unjustifiably refused to allow him to continue his service. While nothing can be done to restore what was unjustly taken from Officer Stewart, I'm pleased to know that the LAPD is taking steps to correct the record, and a record that should be desperately corrected. As we near the close of African American Heritage Month, I believe we must both celebrate the contributions of trailblazing African Americans such as Officer Stewart, while also being willing to acknowledge the perpetuation of unjust systems and the advancement of institutional racism. We must never relent in our confrontation of those evils. So it's in this moment that we endeavor to reimagine the role of law enforcement in our society. I'm encouraged that under the leadership of Chief Michael Moore, we are attempting to reckon with the ways in which communities of color, and in particular the African American community, has historically been treated unfairly, unjustly, brutally, despicably by the Los Angeles Police Department. And it is precisely this sort of recognition that is necessary if we want to restore trust in law enforcement among communities that they are charged to serve. In other words, Madam President, with respect to racism, we have to face it to erase it. It's my hope this recognition will be just one step among many toward what must be an ongoing practice of critical introspection by the police department in Los Angeles. And with that, it's my honor to ask that we adjourn in tribute. One who deserved to have the record set straight would be Officer Robert William Stewart. Madam President.
Mr. Ridley Thomas, we are joined by Chief Moore, who would like to make some brief comments on your adjourning motion. Mr. Chief, can you hear us?
Madam President, I can. Good afternoon, Madam President, and to the members of the council. I am so appreciative on behalf of the men and women of the Los Angeles Police Department for Councilman Mark Ridley Thomas, your leadership on this, as well as Councilman Kevin DeLeon and Councilman Marquise Harris Dawson and Councilwoman Price. This has been an effort for practically the last year and a half, as we looked at our 150th anniversary. Researchers, historians brought to us the fact that this tragic story of this injustice, what I believe was part of the systemic racism within the Los Angeles Police Department in the early 1900s, that resulted in a man who came to this profession honorably, a former slave, moved his family to the city in the mid 1800s, the second of two to join this department as an African American who led a footbeat in the downtown central core along the Broadway corridor for nearly a decade, when he was unjustly accused and unfairly removed without a process of a jury trial that was referenced by Councilmember Ridley Thomas and found and acquitted. And yet the commission failed to reinstate him. He finished his life as a janitor, as a custodial laborer, and died in the city in early 1931. This is an opportunity, as we look back, to look forward. As we look forward, we must recognize that as we look today to challenges of how to ensure equity, fairness, inclusiveness across this agency, across the city in this century, that we acknowledge our errors of our past. I want to thank John Thomas, who's a former LAPD lieutenant and executive officer for retired Councilmember Bernard Parks and former Chief of Police Bernard Parks. He's now the Chief of the Public Safety of USC, along with Michael Davidson, who is a historian, as well as retired Lieutenant Rita Connect. They, alongside Mr. Fred Booker, Commander Alan Hamilton, who's the Vice President of ABLE, Sergeant Jody Steiger, who's the President of Oscar Joel Bryant Association, and Lieutenant Shannon White, all collectively over this past year have worked to establish what does it mean to us today moving forward to ceremoniously reappoint him, which was done yesterday by the Board of Police Commissioners, allowing him to honor and to retire in good standing. I appreciate and thank today for this adjourning motion initiated by Councilmember Mark Ridley Thomas. And I also thank Councilmember DeLeon for the motion relative to the naming of the roll call room in the central area, a fitting tribute to a man that each officer who comes and reports to work, their first activity of the day is to sit in a room and tribute to a person who brought his life to this city to serve the people of this city, who did so admirably and was so unjustly removed. And that is to remind all of us that justice depends, that we recognize the injustices of the past. So thank you all for this moment. I appreciate my members of our employer associations and leadership past and present within the department that recognizes the seriousness of this and the need to move forward in a manner that is both one of humility, recognizing we make failures and shortcomings, but also greatness that we're willing to acknowledge and move forward and do everything to make amends. Unfortunately, in closing, this man dies without any, he died without any survivors. I so much wish that we had an opportunity to recognize those that followed Robert, but unfortunately we don't, except in the fact that each day we come to work and each day we wear a badge. We wear a badge in tribute to the service and life that he led as a police officer. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Mr. Ridley Thomas?
Madam President, I have offered my remarks and I yield.
Thank you. Mr. O'Farrell?
Madam President, I was going to speak on this issue,
Okay.
Unless Mr. O'Farrell was going to speak on this issue as well.
No, go right ahead, Mr. DeLeon.
Hold on for just a second. Go ahead, Mr. De Leon.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I'd like to thank Councilor Mark Ridley Thomas, because I'd like to take this moment also to recognize the significance and the importance of acknowledging the life and the life experience of Officer Robert Stewart. And as we just mentioned a few moments ago, Officer Stewart's dismissal from the LAPD over a century ago was very emblematic of the times. And despite, leading an upright life, demonstrating a willingness to serve the public good, and believing in the unspoken American creed that above all, professed to honor liberty, equality for all people, at the end of the day, he was not seen as an equal, but dismissed because he was a Black man. Now, his standing as the first Black LAPD officer threatened the widely accepted social and racial inequality, clearly, of the times. As a person of color, as a Latino, I can't personally speak to the centuries of injustices experienced by my Black brothers and sisters. I can offer my deep solidarity in knowing that our communities, Black and brown, share many of these overlapping experiences that have long marginalized us as equal members in American society. As we all know, the struggle continues to exist across the nation and every aspect of our culture. So let me just close by saying that I'm inspired by Officer Stewart's courage to persevere and continue living a life of dignity that's not defined by his occupation as a janitor or social recognition, but rather as an internal drive to live a virtuous life. And I find the treatment of Officer Stewart tragic and shameful, and clearly a blight on our city's history, and one that cannot, as we all know collectively, easily be erased by recognition, even at the LA City Council level or the LAPD Police Commission. So as we truly honor Robert Stewart with a deep sense of thanks for the service to our city, and a profound and humble apology for it and the dignity that was forced upon him, we just must do more than just offer symbolic gestures. We will honor him best by recommitting ourselves, our city departments like LAPD, to fighting for the justice of all individuals. So I want to thank again my colleague, Mark Ridley Thomas, as well as Mr. Curran Price on their leadership and recognition of this fallen officer who was dismissed because of a charge of sexual assault when he was found innocent but nonetheless, they fired him because of the color of his skin. We honor his memory and we adjourn collectively in the memory of this man. Thank you, Madam President.
Mr. Price, would you like to also speak on this adjourning motion, sir?
President, and just want to thank my colleagues for their heartfelt comments on this matter. I want to give a shout out to the chief. I know this was a promise the chief made about a year ago to right the wrong, and I'm glad that we're finally seeing that happen. You know, the story of his career has been recounted, but I think it is significant to note that he was on trial twice, acquitted both times, and still was not reinstated. Again, just symbolizing the tempter of the time and the level of disrespect, the level of discrimination that was apparent even at that time. And so, while we are certainly doing all we can to make up for what was done, you know, it never really is made up. And so, this is something I think that we want to see happen in our police department because it's right. It's the right thing to do. And although he may not have any blood relatives, we are all his survivors. We are all his survivors. We all have the legacy of the fine service. He, you know, it was documented that he was of exemplary service, was well thought of by colleagues and the community. Yet this frivolous claim brought him down and brought shame to him. And so I'm proud to join my colleagues in acknowledging the past, but certainly recognizing the present and the future. I think it was a significant, certainly the chief was instrumental in making sure that this came forward. It was significant that the two African-American members on the police commission made the motion, seconded the motion that actually brought the recognition forward. And I'm just glad to be part of a community that even belatedly recognizes the fine achievements of an individual who did all he could to bring honor not only to his community, but to his city and to the department. So may he continue, Robert William Stewart, may he continue to rest in peace. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. O'Farrell?
Thank you, Madam President. Colleagues, I'd like to adjourn today's meeting in honor of Policarpo Eladio Chaj Lopez. Policarpio Eladio Chaj Lopez was born in the Rancho de Tejas village, San Francisco El Alto, Totonicapan, Guatemala, on January 16, 1972. Son of Magdalena Lopez and Policarpo Chaz Cox, the fourth of 7 brothers and sisters. He studied at the mixed rural school of the community and at his high school at the National Institute for Men in the city of Quetzaltenango. Policarpo came to the United States in 1993, and he began his community work and developed his leadership in the United States from a young age through his involvement in the Florence Project in Arizona, where he experienced the suffering of the immigrant community detained without access to interpreters, and played a key role in defending the rights of immigrants displaced and detained. Since those years, Policarpo established bridges between the indigenous communities of the North and the South. In Los Angeles, he was an expert organizer of migrant communities. He founded and served as a guide for the organization of the San Francisco El Alto communities residing in Los Angeles. In addition, he was co-founder of Maya Vision, a community organization dedicated to the defense of indigenous and collective rights, teaching Mayan spirituality, conservation of Mayan languages, family preservation, and protection of Mother Earth. It was the first nonprofit organization established by the Mayas, firmly demonstrating the sovereignty of the Mayan people here in Los Angeles. He was also co-founder and vice president of the Techantit Cultural Center from its inception until the day of his departure. The CCT is an organization dedicated to the preservation and rescue of ancestral roots and the defense of the rights of the original peoples of the continent, Abya Yala, especially El Salvador and Guatemala, in addition to promoting education, art, culture, and the rescue of ancestral history of El Salvador. Policarpo passed away on February 16th of this month. Policarpo Eladio Chaz Amaya Quiche, firekeeper and spiritual emergent leader, a true visionary who dedicated his life as a transitional defender of indigenous peoples, self-determination, and empowerment in California and across the United States. May he rest in peace.
Thank you, Mr. O'Farrell. Thank you. Mr. Cedillo, followed by Mr. De Leon. I believe you both are speaking on the same adjourning motion. Go ahead, Mr. Cedillo.
Yes, Madam Chair, this is a joint acknowledgement. CD1 and CD14, we adjourn in the memory and honor of Linda Phelps. She was a pillar of our community in Highland Park. Ms. Phelps enjoyed, obviously, her family. Her love of animals is well known. She was a big fan of Elvis Presley, and the community has lost a titan in Highland Park. Linda was a founding member of so many of the organizations that we have up in the Northeast, the historic Highland Park Neighborhood Council, along with her son Kevin, and for several decades, she was involved in just about every organization, starting with H. HHPNC, HPHT, HPNA, CPAC. The list just goes on and on. She was well known, her and her son, who accompanied her at so many meetings. The northeast part of our district is a very active district. It's one with a lot of civic activity. There's tremendous pride over in the northeast of the kind of quaintness of our neighborhoods, of our main boulevard, and she was just a figure, a well-known figure in our community. So I want to hand this off to Mr. De Leon, but let her know that in CD1 she has been mourned, acknowledged, and recognized for her well-lived life in historic Highland Park. I thank you.
Mr. De Leon?
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Councilmember Cedillo. Today, as we all know, we journey in the memory of Linda Phelps, who Mr. Cedillo just mentioned was a pillar in our Highland Park community. As Gil just mentioned, she loved animals, she loved Elvis Presley, and she loved her children and the community. Not necessarily in that order, but she was clearly a titan in Highland Park. She founding member of the historic Highland Park Neighborhood Council, along with her son Kevin. And over the past several decades, she was deeply involved in just about every community organization that existed that had an acronym, representing the HHPNC, the HPHT, the HPNA, the CPAC, and the list goes on. And like many of the incredible women that serve as the backbone for our communities, Linda was able to balance that home life with the community activism, raising her two children, her husband, Roger, at their home in Highland Park. Her son, Kevin, recalls the many times he accompanied her to community meetings doing homework or reading a book, while Linda skillfully confronted the issues of the day with incredible grace as well as dignity. Kevin says that her enduring commitment to improving the lives of her neighbors was the driving force that kept her going for all of these years. And Linda will dearly be missed by her two children, all of the Highland Park community that Gil and I share together, and the many, many people whose lives that she has bettered over the course of a life lived in service to others. So I join my colleague, Mr. Cedillo, in adjourning in the memory of Linda Phelps. And lastly, Madam President, I also just want to thank Councilmember Mitchell Farrell for that wonderful adjournment memory in the name of Policarpo. I knew him personally, such a great man, a great human being, and Policarpo will be incredibly missed. So thank you very much, Mr. O'Farrell, for adjourning in his memory. Thank you very much, Madam President.
Thank you. Members, are there any other adjourning motions? Seeing none, our meeting is adjourned. Thank you.